In today's day and age of information and advanced technology, how far would you take your knowledge to save the only life you know? How far would you run to achieve greatness at the expense of your own mortal sanity? What price immortality? Severed Angel returns with their latest album, The Cost of Creation. Severed Angel's The Cost of Creation will be released in the summer of 2026 on No Life Till Metal Records. Pre-orders will be available at severedangel.com. Severed Angels, The Cost of Creation, dropping summer 2026 on No Life Till Metal Records.
Ladies and gentlemen, how do?
He's the legend.
He had the ultimate metal voice for me. Gruff street, it sounded like he meant it.
Short hair, attitude, didn't give a shit about anything. I just remember thinking, oh my God, this is something completely new.
It was like discovering fucking fire.
He was abusing his voice. It seemed like he wanted his voice to fail.
2 albums, world tours, and then Bruce Dickinson comes in and it makes The Millionaires. That would have hurt.
This has come at a good time, actually. If it doesn't work out, I don't think I'd be around much longer.
He cannot go from his wheelchairs to the bed and do nothing.
Get that fucking camera out my face!
In this state, that's not even for amputation, so we have to fight for this leg.
Oh! My goodness! The tension's just going to get worse and worse. You want to lose money or you want to make money? Everything's over. Fuck it all.
Shot, stabbed, put in prison. I don't give a fuck.
I want to do what I was put on the earth to do, but I've got to get myself ready to do it. I'm taking care of me for the first time ever.
Oh, he's a fighter.
These people have saved his life.
100%.
Why are you doing this?
Maiden songs, albums change your life. So why not give something back to this person?
It's on my breast.
Iron Maiden will step in with money.
What?
At some point I noticed things is going backward.
I need to play music. It's for me, inside of me. I've gone through fucking hell 8 years. So whatever condition, just do it.
Fans gave him a chance once. Iron Maiden gave him a chance. He will not get another chance.
You die once, didn't you? Well, just my luck, I'll come back a second time.
No one's going to forget him. He'll always be a legend.
And his music, it never die.
Music is Life podcast. This is your host, Lou Maps. Find out all you need to know about the show over at my link tree. That's linktr.ee/Lou Maps. I'm happy to revive a podcast that I started 7 years ago in my car after driving long Uber shifts at night, which evolved into the YouTube channel you're watching now. And I'm also happy to add these episodes to the Ratsa Review channel, where I've been consistently for the last 5 years at this point. A lot has happened in my life since my last interview, where I had the honor of speaking with former Scorpions drummer Herman Rarabelle, such as writing and recording music with my band Severed Angel, which also has my fellow Ratsa Review co-host Wayne Noon as our drummer. We released 2 albums independently, our 2023 self-titled debut, and our 2024 sophomore album Skyward. The band then signed with No Life Till Metal Records, a subsidiary of Rox Records, for distribution. And we released our 3rd album, When Eternity Ends, in 2025. This year, in 2026, we're releasing our first concept album, The Cost of Creation, in the summertime. And I think it's our best work that we've released until now. If any of you are fans of Queensryche's Operation Mindcrime or Dream Theater's Metropolis 2 Scenes from a Memory, you're going to love this album. We're also releasing an animated film in tandem with the album called The Cost of Creation, directed by my friend Peter Karnick. And I've seen some of the test footage he did, and it looks amazing. Also, since the last episode I did, many things have happened which were not in my favor, such as unemployment, but it's no secret that we're living in a different time than we were over 6 years ago. Still, I'm driven to find a way to make a living while sending resumes out and taking care of family issues, which I will not get into. But thankfully, I'm in good health and good spirits. And I've also lost about 30 pounds since the beginning of 2026. So the job situation is something I could discuss later on. Maybe I could even discuss how to navigate life as a working person and musician. That's for another episode. However, the thing that brought me the most unease was dealing with a lack of mobility. Back in December of 2024, I was working out doing leg presses, and the next day I felt this excruciating pain in my left knee. I did see an orthopedic doctor to diagnose it, and it was a lack of cartilage in the left knee. Unfortunately, this was something I didn't address until almost a year and a half later, as I was taking care of family business. Again, nothing that needs to be discussed, but I'm okay. My wife's okay, and my daughter's okay, thankfully. Right around March of 2026, I was dealing with slight lower back pain, and I wasn't sure if it was my kidneys due to a possible kidney stone. I had already passed 2 in my lifetime, and the pain felt familiar. Thankfully, an ultrasound showed that it wasn't a kidney stone. However, I did notice pain in the right leg and knee on top of the discomfort I was feeling in the left knee. So I went to see my primary care doctor, and it was determined that I had sciatica. As the days went by in April, I noticed it really hurt to stand up for longer than 30 seconds, let alone walk. Easter was quite painful, and I was rushed to the hospital that Monday to get morphine, which was a temporary fix. All this medication from cyclobenzaprine to prednisone wasn't helping. Once I got my MRI results, I saw where my L4, L5, and S1 vertebrae were practically fused and sending pain signals down my right leg. Thanks to a great pain management doctor that was covered by my insurance, I received an epidural shot, which allowed me to walk again, albeit with some pain, which is where knee braces and Percocet came in handy. I say it was still painful because I felt all the pain in my right knee. Well, an x-ray determined that it was again due to a lack of cartilage now in the right knee. So I was getting physical therapy 3 times a week, and I made an appointment with another orthopedic doctor for consultation regarding gel shots for the knees. Unfortunately, Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield stopped covering all gel shots back in January of 2026. So I made the conscientious decision to go for the cortisone shots. Well, with all 3 shots, the epidural to the spine and 2 cortisone shots to the knee, my mobility was thankfully back to normal. And I'm grateful to the family who looked out for me and to the medical staff at Optum and Jag Physical Therapy in East Meadow for helping me get back to good again. Why am I bringing this all up?
Oh, woe to me.
Well, because I just watched a documentary of a musician that I grew up respecting, and seeing what he went through, I told myself, wow, if I had avoided the symptoms for as long as he has, I might have ended up like him. Anyone who knows me knows that Iron Maiden is my second favorite band of all time after Black Sabbath, and that my third favorite album of all time is their sophomore album, Killers. I was 6 years old in 1986 when I discovered my late brother Michael's cassette in his tape collection. I had already became a fan of Iron Maiden ever since I heard the song Number of the Beast when I was about 4 or 5, thanks again to my older brothers. When I first heard the song, the best way I could explain it was as a horror film, but put to music. It scared the bejesus out of me, and all I could think was, I want more! Number of the Beast, Peace of Mind, Power Slave, Live After Death, and Somewhere in Time became the soundtrack of my youth, more than any other band. I came home from first grade one day and I wanted to listen to some of my brother Mike's cassettes in his cassette collection, and he had a boombox. So at the top of the pile in his collection was a cassette from Iron Maiden, but I had never heard or seen of this album until then. It had a picture of Iron Maiden's mascot Eddie with shoulder-length green hair and a black shirt holding a hatchet in a London city landscape, with two hands grasping at his shirt with his blood dripping from the hatchet. That album was Killers, and it just so happened that side 2 was rewound to the beginning, so I popped the cassette in, and of course I recognized Steve Harris's bass line and the twin guitars of Dave Murray and Adrian Smith. The drummer was not Nico McBrain, but Clive Burr, and as much as I respect Nico, I prefer Clive as a drummer. But neither here nor there. And then I heard the voice. Immediately I thought, what in the world? That's not Bruce Dickinson. The voice was more aggressive, more raspy, and more sinister. Notice I didn't say punky. But he had a range where he could hit the high G in that song with ease. Is this Iron Maiden? Is this a different band? Who is this guy? And why do I like his voice so much? It wasn't Number of the Beast. It seemed more streetwise, inner city, nasty. And all I knew was, I want more. It just so happened that I listened to the entire cassette while I was doing my first grade homework. And this was the version of Killers that had Twilight Zone as the second track on side 2, which was exclusive to the American release on Harvest ME Records. The songs I had heard from the introductory Ides of March to Wrathchild to Murders in the Rue Morgue to Another Life to Genghis Khan to Innocent Exile to Killers to Twilight Zone to even Prodigal Son, which wiped the floor with every power ballad that came in its wake, to Purgatory to Drifter, just captured me as a kid. The dynamics of the album, the time changes within the songs, the guitar work, the rhythm section, and the voice. It was perfection in a bottle, and it spoke to the little nerdy kid from the inner city in me. Basically, steroids on audio format for me. My brother Mike came home and I asked him, again, mind you, I was 6, what happened to Bruce Dickinson's voice on Killers? Mike responded, that's not Bruce Dickinson, that's Paul Di'Anno. Paul Di'Anno? Who's Paul Di'Anno? He responded, he was Maiden's first singer. Being that we were New Yorkers, we didn't know a thing about Paul Mario Day and Dennis Wilcock, and most of us wouldn't know of any Maiden lineup pre-debut album unless you had a copy of a real dead one in 1983, which showed the Maiden family tree. All I know is I instantly fell in love with Iron Maiden's Killers. I could be objective and say that I accept the fact that most people prefer Maiden fronted with Bruce, and I don't blame them, because Bruce is an incredible singer and frontman who has sung most of the Iron Maiden classics that people are familiar with, from Run to the Hills to The Trooper to 2 Minutes to Midnight to Wasted Years to The Evil That Men Do to Bring Your Daughter to the Slaughter.
What?
I don't care what any of you baboons say. That was the #1 song for Maiden in the UK, and Steve thought it was good enough to include on No Prayer for the Dying after Bruce recorded it with Yannick for the Nightmare on Elm Street 5 soundtrack, and this is my podcast.
So you will listen to every damn word I have to say!
However, being that art is subjective, for me, Killers was the quintessential Iron Maiden record for me, and still to this day. With production from Martin Birch, who was known for his work with Deep Purple, Rainbow, Black Sabbath, Blue Oyster Cult, and Whitesnake, Maiden found a producer who took the time to hone the band's sound and songwriting craft to sonic excellence. And again, this is also with the acknowledgement that some people actually prefer the debut album with its raw, unpolished production as their favorite one. And that's the best thing about being a Maiden fan. Whether your favorite era is the Di'Anno era, the Dickinson or Blaze Bailey era, whether your preferred drummer is Nico or Clive Burr or even Doug Sampson from the Soundhouse tapes or Simon Dawson in the current lineup, there's no wrong answer. It all matters what the music means to you. However, due to my love of Maiden and a respect and appreciation for Di'Anno's voice, the question was asked, whatever happened to Paul? In the States, no one ever really knew.
By the time we'd done the second album, though, it was sort of going a little bit more into the sort of
just heavy metal, and I was losing interest by the absolute second, and yeah, that was difficult. It's difficult. It was that thing about whether the second album, the music was changing quite a bit, yeah, and I was sort of not really, really happy with it, and I didn't think I was giving 100% because I was losing interest. And you can't do that in a band like Iron Maiden. You've all got to be like 100% there, focused on everything, and I wasn't. And to get me over the shock of that happening to me, because it came a bit of a surprise, to be honest with you. It was you got to find other ways to fill the void, isn't it? And I was sort of drinking, snorting coke and stuff like that. Thinking that that's sort of going to help sort of fill in the bits that are missing, you know what I mean? And it wasn't in any way, shape or form, but I knew it was all building up to the day I wanted to walk in there and sort of say, this has got to end. And we all came to an amicable agreement when it did it, because I didn't want to let the band down, I didn't want to let the fans down, I certainly didn't want to let myself down, I let myself down in a lot of ways, actually, like fucking about and all that stuff and that, and, I ain't no angel, there's still ponce about now, every now and again, don't you, but like you do it, but, no, I'd lost my focus with that altogether, and all that, this is crap, so it all had to stop, for the band's sake and for my own.
So in other words, boys and girls,
cocaine's a hell of a drug.
That's right, China White, Booger Sugar, the Yayo, Flake, Nose Candy, Coca-Cola, the Krell, Cocoa Puffs, Charlie, Toot, Gold Dust, Vitamin C, Snow, Okie Doke.
Get on with it. Yes, get on with it.
Get on with it!
Moving right along, Paul did have a string of releases post-Maiden, including an odd attempt to go AOR with the 1984 self-titled album from his eponymous band, Diano. Mind you, the tour for this album was so short that the band broke up right after it. There was one live DVD and CD that came from it, from their televised performance at the Camden Palace in London. It's an interesting timepiece to watch, as the bandmates look like they're dressed up to play with Loverboy, while Paul looks like Mad Max wearing his leathers from Maiden, albeit with a jacket that only had one sleeve. Don't get me wrong, his voice sounds great, but the whole gig just looked quite odd. Not one Maiden cover, but they did cover You Really Got Me by the Kinks and Don't Let Me Be Misunderstood by the Animals. Yeah, I don't get it either. AOR was just not the right look or sound for Paul, but again, his voice sounded great. Then there was the Gog Magog project in 1986, which also featured his former Maiden bandmate Clive Burr, future Maiden guitarist Yannick Gers, Whitesnake bassist Neil Murray, and founding Def Leppard guitarist Pete Willis. This group was founded by the man who signed Genesis, Jonathan King, with songs he tried to get published and out. None of the bandmates were allowed to write their own material. The band only had one 3-song EP, which is available as one track on streaming. All I could say about Gog Magog is this. Jonathan King, you had a band of musical talent that had the possibility of being one of the best heavy rock supergroups, and I can only tell you one thing.
You blew it!
Paul thankfully returned to form with Paul Di'Anno's Battlezone, a very heavy, hard, and fast metal album, kicked up a notch from where Maiden was at the time. Do I think if this was released on a better label that it could have stood a chance with the heavy contenders of the time like Metallica and Accept? Yeah, absolutely. But in the music industry, labels are the dangling carrot hanging from a noose. Yet a musician couldn't make a living unless they were on a label that had funding for tour support. And the only way to assure that is if the label had a staff that could afford a good marketing department, and if they had good distribution, where they could have marketed the album to every record chain and mom and pop store. Also, with a minor independent, that is a position which is not guaranteed. Yet, Battlezone is probably the best known work outside of Maiden for Paul, and some of the best music he's ever released. I do recommend it. My pick, I'd say Fighting Back, because it had a more raw approach and the songs are really good. After Battlezone's first 2 albums, Paul released material with Praying Mantis, former Maiden guitarist Dennis Stratton, and even Raven bassist John Gallagher. However, the material released with John wasn't actually a live album. It was a studio recording that they added live noise to. So nothing about it was live.
You're a phony! Hey, this guy's a great big phony!
However, it was the beginning of Paul releasing live material and new studio recordings of old Iron Maiden songs. Not gonna lie, the material showed that he could still sing and not just the Maiden material. But unfortunately, a string of legal issues kept Paul from moving forward and finding success, such as showcasing for BMG Records in New York with his new band, Paul Di'Anno Killers, only to perform songs from the first two Maiden albums. They signed him to a $200,000 record deal, only to pull out of the deal when they figured out what he was doing. Now, Paul actually wrote a book that was released around 2002 called The Beast, where he goes into detail about his entire life. Unfortunately, many readers and critics felt that many of the stories in the book were fabricated. So was there truth to any of it? It's kind of hard to say when you read the story and see there's a negative portrayal of himself and some of the violence portrayed in the book. I would like to think that anyone from the West End of London wouldn't have grown up to do despicable things, such as the ones he mentioned in the book. But even Paul himself and some of his bandmates mentioned that a lot in the book was purposely overblown to sell more copies.
Oh, a bullshit artist.
I was still a fan of the man's work, and in 2009, I wanted to get my band at the time, the Rebel Medium, to open for Paul at B.B. King's Blues Club. Unfortunately, due to immigration and visa issues, Paul was constantly denied entry into the U.S. as a result of an arrest in the mid-1990s for spousal abuse, cocaine possession, and firearms offenses. He served 4 months in the Los Angeles County Jail. Reminds me of the song Running Free. Before being sent to the United Kingdom. Mind you, this was covered in his book, so he spent most of his time touring in Europe and Latin America. And he finally did tour the United States in 2010, less than a year after the Rebel Medium broke up. So I do regret that opportunity never happened. But that's okay.
That's okay! I don't mind! I don't mind!
Fast forward a year later, Paul is arrested for benefits fraud, getting disability payments while still touring. Who snitched him out? Was it Steve Harris? Was it Bruce Dickinson? Was it Tekashi 6ix9ine? Nope, it was live footage from YouTube. That's right. The streaming platform YouTube was being watched by a member of the UK's benefits program, where they saw Paul jumping off drum risers and performing on stage. He then served for 9 months in the Hoosgow and did his time and went back to touring again. However, this is where the story gets sad. I mentioned earlier about my mobility issues and how I handled it. Well, this is where I had empathy for Paul because apparently the lifetime of hard partying and not putting his health first caught up with him. The cartilage in his knees were gone. And basically his walking was bone on bone in the knees. Without cartilage, cortisone, and gel shots, this could lead into a big problem, unless it's addressed. Sadly, he addressed the pain he was feeling with chemicals and alcohol. I knew from my own experience being on 10 milligram Percocet, that meant I had to stay clean, far away from any alcohol intake for almost 2 months. And I do enjoy my Jack and Coke, but not at the expense of causing any permanent damages to myself that my wife and daughter would have to deal with. Recently, Cleopatra Records released a documentary called Di'Anno, Iron Maiden's Lost Singer, directed by Wes Ershowski, the man who directed the 2009 Lemmy documentary. But unlike the Lemmy documentary, this was a very hard watch. I hated seeing Paul experiencing his mobility issues, confined to a wheelchair and needing constant help. You could see in the film that the conditions he was facing was making him uncomfortable, depressed, and anxious. Do I feel that the film was exploitative? No, not in the least. There's a big difference between watching a reality series like Celebrity Rehab and watching this. Celebrity Rehab was horrible to watch because it made you question the authenticity of rehabilitation centers and if this particular show was solely based on ratings and conflict. This film shows Paul's conflict with his situation and how he did everything he could to help himself for the first time ever in his life. What made it hard was seeing Paul had to travel to Zagreb, Croatia to get the medical treatment that he needed to help repair his legs and mobility. He was definitely a stranger in a strange land, no pun intended, being in a country where English is not the first language and he's far away from home in England where his family was. This had to take a toll on one's psyche, and it's shown throughout the film. In between segments of the film, you have some great interviews with people who knew Paul and musicians who respected him. Paul's sister and son are in the film, and we also have Overkill's Bobby Blitz Ellsworth, former Megadeth bassist Dave Jr. Ellefson, Metallica's James Hetfield, Praying Mantis's Tino Troy, and Exodus's Gary Holt. You also have former Iron Maiden members Terry Wapram, Doug Sampson, Barry Purkis, aka Thunderstick, Dennis Stratton, Blaze Bailey, and Bob Sawyer talking about Paul. Paul Di'Anno fan Stepan organizes a Kickstarter campaign to bring Paul to Croatia to get him the medical attention that he needs to repair himself. And of all the places to end up, Maiden's opening date of their 2022 leg of their Legacy of the Beast tour is in Zagreb, Croatia. Paul makes his triumphant return to the stage the day before Maiden's show. The day after, Paul is driven to the arena in Zagreb where Maiden is performing. And a brief but meaningful reunion takes place between him and Steve Harris. As a lifelong Maiden fan, this was great to see. But what happens next made me all the more grateful. When Paul left Maiden in 1981, he lost access to royalties, but was given a $30,000 severance package. But for all the accusations Steve gets of being a tyrant, his actions prove anything but. Steve, on behalf of Iron Maiden, paid for the remaining costs of Paul's surgery and care while still in Croatia. It wasn't publicized. They didn't virtue signal to the press or to the film crew about what great guys they are. And they never mentioned it in their own documentary, Burning Ambition, that came out right before this documentary. This wasn't the act of a band leader. It was the act of a friend and what he helped create over 40 years ago. As much flack as I've given Steve Harris for some of the Maiden material post-2000 reunion, I've never denied his humanity, talent, or success. But knowing that he did what he did for Paul gives me a whole new level of respect for him, and I salute him for wanting to give Paul a second chance. Now for the disturbing part. The documentary actually shows the surgery. And in between clips of the surgery, they highlighted with Paul's performance of Murders in the Rue Morgue in Zagreb. That was the hardest thing to watch as you see up close what they had to do to repair his knee. It's not pretty and not recommended for you to watch if you have a weak constitution. I think I'll have a hard time thinking about the song without thinking of that scene. Paul is ready to go on tour in South America, but even I have to admit, this is a bit premature and very badly thought out. He needed time to heal and recuperate. He's still in the wheelchair, and getting into many of the venues proves to be futile as he's facing smaller than normal elevators, venues without ramps for his wheelchair, and vocal issues. You can see through this segment that it's making him anxious and upset. This is where a viewer can argue that the film is being exploitative, but it's nothing comparable to the 1989 John Belushi biopic Wired, starring Michael Chiklis, which was exploitative to a fault, to no fault of Chiklis's at all. He was given a script and acted the hell out of it. But when the screenwriters are working with Bob Woodward, who wrote the book, and are solely focused on Belushi's addiction issues, it's a gross mischaracterization. This was a film that Belushi's friends Dan Aykroyd and Bill Murray didn't want released due to its one-sided nature. Also, Bill Murray had this to say about Bob Woodward on his interview on the Joe Rogan Experience.
However, when I read Wired, the book written by, Woodward, about Belushi, I read like 5 pages of Wired, and I went, oh my God, they framed Nixon. like, all of a sudden I went, oh my God, if this is what he writes about my friend that I've known, for half of my adult life, which is completely inaccurate, talking to like the people of the outer circle getting the story. What the hell could they have done to Nixon?
The transparency in Di'Anno isn't exploitative. It's sad, yeah, but you're rooting for Paul to make it out okay in the end. Any showing of his being anxious or upset is a normal emotion and human reaction to what he's going through. And the film doesn't make you say at the end of it, well, he did it to himself. Well, he deserves what happened to him for all of his past mistakes. Was Paul a flawed human being? Absolutely. But having flaws is part of what makes us human. Did he make mistakes leaving Maiden as they were about to break the mainstream and sign bad record deals? Sure, show me a musician that hasn't signed bad deals. If the things said about him regarding his deportation from the United States and his benefits fraud are true, he paid his debt to society. I don't excuse or condone physical abuse of any kind on any man, woman, child, or animal, and I would say people who act that way deserve a wood chipper. But we all know the dangers of addiction to that filthy white powder. Paul was never a repeat offender of anything that got him in trouble in the first place. I think Paul is deserving of grace. He did tell Louder Sound that, quote, my biggest regrets are those domestic violence incidents in my past. I'm really ashamed of them. He was heavily messed up on drugs and alcohol at the time. We hear so many casualties in the music industry because of these two things, on top of mismanagement, enabling bad behavior, bad contracts, etc. Maiden, at the height of their career, played over 180 shows on the Power Slave Tour from 1984 to 1985. That's an insane amount of gigs in a year. Anyone could descend into madness doing this. Add chemical addictions to this, you'll be gone before you get home. And how do you return to normality after this? It's sad that Paul couldn't return to normality. To have had him still here, if I could have told him one thing, I would have said, Paul, get a job, earn a living, and go play shows on the weekend in the UK. Not go on a tour where you don't have access to your home, your bed, or your doctors. The days of road dogging it are completely over. Even heritage bands are smart about their touring cycles now. Either do a 2-week residency or do smaller 30 to 50-day tours in bigger locations so more people have access to them thanks to public or personal transportation. Metallica performed 2 dates in one venue on weekends. Maiden's tour legs nowadays don't last longer than 30 days per country, and they take breaks in between legs. Sadly, this film did show that Paul passed away in October of 2024 from heart failure, but he had his final tours of Latin America and Europe. I would have traded those tours to have had him still here. I almost felt that he just wanted one more shot of glory on the road, but it saddens me that it was at the expense of his health and physical recovery. Paul deserved better. And if anyone wants to come at me regarding his prior convictions, let me remind you, he's not Phil Spector, and he's definitely not Ian Watkins of the Lost Prophets. Rest in piss, you inhuman piece of excrement. I repeat, Paul paid his debt to society and was not a repeat offender. This film ends with Iron Maiden addressing the passing of Paul in St. Paul, Minnesota.
I don't want to put a downer on the proceeding at all, because our friend, our band member, Paul Diano, passed away, as you are probably aware. And if you're not aware of that fact, you are now. So, Paul was instrumental in the first 2 albums, groundbreaking with Killers and the first album, an amazing voice, devoted to rock and roll right up till the last minute of his life. So, would just like to give maybe, for those of you who were born and still remember those early albums, when obviously I wasn't in the band and he was. And those of you who were fans of the stuff he did with Battlezone and his own projects afterwards. And for anybody else that fancies having a listen to the tracks like Remember Tomorrow and stuff like that, which are absolutely awesome. I'm just going to ask everybody to just take like a few seconds to just say, close your eyes in silence and say, just internally, mentally. If you believe in God, if you don't believe in God, it actually doesn't matter. Just believe in what you believe in and just say, thanks, boss, for doing what you did. So, Paul, if you're listening, this is a little message from Minneapolis to wherever you are, upstairs or downstairs, you're having fun. Minneapolis, for Paul Diano, scream for me! I can't fucking hear you and he can't fucking hear you! Scream for me!
It was great to see the band acknowledge what Paul did with the band, and for the fans. I think Wes Orshowski's film was well edited and put together and told a great story. I think he documented that Paul was anything but the lost Iron Maiden singer, because we, the fans, never forgot Paul. The saddest takeaway for me is that Paul never gave himself the grace he needed to have lived a happy, painless life. Having lost the ability to walk for almost a month was a turning point for me. Thankfully, I made a full recovery and have lost 30 pounds since the beginning of 2026. I actually have to thank Paul because seeing the trailer and watching and reading reviews of the film made me say, I can't do this to myself or anyone else I love. If I saw Paul Diano today, I'd tell him thank you for giving me the strength to face my fears and anxiety and face my issues head on. I only wish he could have done that for himself earlier because we were a lot better having had him. It's funny. I'm not saying Paul Diano was an angel. He was a flawed human like we all are. But I wish he could have gotten rid of the toxic mentality that so many rock and rollers partook in. I think it's a shame that we lost Phil Lynott of Thin Lizzy, Steve Clark of Def Leppard, Bon Scott of AC/DC, and John Bonham of Led Zeppelin. All casualties of the music industry. Now, of course, we could argue that they all had agency. They could have just walked away from it. But as we learned from sleazebags like Clive Davis, Lear Cohen, Lou Pearlman, and Diddy, people who get locked into these stupid contracts can't just walk away without getting attorneys involved. And once you taste the sweet nectar of success, but lose it the next day, do you ever really recover from it? I can only respond, yes, you can, because it's all a matter of how many punches you can take and roll with and how you can bounce back on your own. The music industry needs fodder to survive, but musicians sure as hell do not need the music industry anymore. If the day of the rock star is over, according to Gene Simmons, then I say good. Let it be over with. Let the day of the musician shine through. We don't need the flashy crap that comes along with being a rock star. Just write your songs and put it out there. Don't quit your day job. Just work on your music. The hit parade is a hit charade. You don't need validation from these industry people who wouldn't piss on you if you were on fire. If music means something to you, then let the music, not the image or the fame, drive you. I only wish Paul had put his health first rather than to feel like he had no choice but to go out on tour to make a living. He didn't need to beat himself up for the fans because we all lost something when we lost him. I would have waited for him to get his health in order before he played another show. I wish he had someone that could have motivated him to be good to himself. Diano's now available on Blu-ray and streaming. You can purchase a copy of the Blu-ray at Cleopatra Records' website or on Amazon. I give Wes Rashowski a 10 out of 10 on his film. That being said, I would like to address the distributor, Cleopatra Records. Please do a better job of marketing your stuff. Most people I know wouldn't have even known this film was out unless I posted about it on my social media. So yeah, do better. Thank you. Thanks for watching the Music is Life podcast with Lou Mavs. Once again, go check out my link tree, which is linktr.ee/Lou Mavs. Also, check out the other podcasts I'm on with my buddies Greg Noggle, Manny Mejias, James Lilliquist, Stan Ev, and my drummer Wayne Noon from Severed Angel over on the Ratsaw Review YouTube channel. And finally, check out my band Severed Angel over at severedangel.com. Once again, our new album is The Cost of Creation, and it's dropping this summer, 2026, on No Life Till Metal Records. Once again, thanks for watching the Music is Life podcast. This is Lou Mavs signing off. And remember, all art is valid. And all artists are valid too. Cheers.